So today, my guest, Carmen Rosas, is going to be talking to us about estate planning for women of color. This is such an important conversation that we need to have because a lot of times we get into one of two camps. One that, oh, we don't have to worry about estate planning. We're not going anywhere. We don't make enough money to do that. And the other side of that is when we do make the money, it's like, okay, do we really need to have that conversation? Who do we talk to? How do we get that set up? So I think there's a gap in information for women, especially women of color, because we're not traditionally raised with estate planning and financial planning and our backgrounds and our upbringings. And I'm not afraid to say that I didn't even get into investing until I was in my 30s. So my family didn't, it was go to school, don't worry about adult stuff. You'll talk about that some other time. And my parents never taught us that. So we're left kind of at a deficit, whereas our white counterparts, let's just be real talk, they're raised and groomed with this knowledge, but we're not. But luckily, we have people like Carmen who can demystify that for us. And she's going to tell you a little bit about all the stuff she has going on, but she's going to give some crucial information about what you need to do as a woman entrepreneur in getting your estate planning together. So thank you and welcome, Carmen.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here. Yes, estate planning is my jam. And it's actually funny. So I had no idea. I mean, I took one class in law school, right, about estate planning, but my family never talked about it, right? My grandma still saves her money in like a coffee can in the kitchen, right? She's from Mexico. And it's one of those things where you don't ask about money. You don't talk about money. It's so taboo. And so, yes, there's so many people, especially, well, there's two, right? There's women and then people of color. And being a woman of color, you're kind of in this boat where it's just not talked about. And I love that there's this whole financial kind of independence conversation that's happening where women are becoming more and more aware of their finances, which is great. But like you said, well, what happens when you start making the money, right? And you're investing, but how do you protect it so that it goes on to future generations, or even just so that it's protected for like, your kids, maybe just loved ones, maybe you have a partner. So I will go into kind of estate planning and what it is, right? Because there's kind of three different things that I get around estate planning, or I should say excuses. And they're not really excuses, right? It's just not having enough education or people out there talking about it. Because as you said, estate planning is a very white male dominated field. And so if you're not, and you're not white and you're not male, you probably have like never heard of this before. Right. And right, as people and women of color, right, the income gap, the wealth gap is so huge still. That we don't know what it is, right? Our parents probably didn't know. And so the three things that I get a lot are, one is I don't have an estate. Like what, it's an estate is, it's you envision like Bridgerton, or you think Downton Abbey or some like mansion, king, queen, empire status, right? Well, that's not the case, right? An estate is basically the things that you own. So your house, and I love it because, I'm in Silicon Valley, and people are like, oh, I just have my house. It's just a little house. Well, the house is worth over $1.5 million. It's not that little. And the probate threshold, right? So if you don't have an estate plan or you have no planning in place, the default is that it goes to probate court, which means that, and I'm going to, this is going to be a lot of information, but I am doing a workshop where we'll dive deeper just into estate planning and what all of that means and how we can use the tools. So an estate is not as big as you think. It's just what you own. If you're over the age of 18, so this is point number 2, right? If you're over the age of 18, you need to have an estate plan. People think, oh, I'm too young. I'm not, nobody wants to talk about dying. And so when we think we have all the time in the world, but the truth is we don't know what will happen tomorrow. And as cliche as it sounds, tomorrow isn't guaranteed. It is true. If we woke up this morning breathing, we are blessed compared to some people who didn't make it through the night, right? You can get into a car accident. You can get hit by a car. You can have a heart attack. You don't know what can happen within the next second, let alone tomorrow. And so it's never too early to start. Starting now is ideal. If you're over the age of 18, go out and get an estate plan. And then the other part is, it's too expensive. That an estate plan is really expensive. And there's so many options out there, right? Like I'm an attorney, so I'm not a huge fan of DIY, but I always say something is better than nothing. There's like LegalZoom, right? There's Susie Orman. There's lots of white white owned companies that provide these, legal services. I actually do have a DIY option for people because I understand that I do want to make it affordable, right? And as we were talking earlier about empower yourself, I want legal service to be affordable for people. And so I actually do have a DIY option, but having something in place is better than nothing. And to be honest, if you look at the cost of probate, so the cost of not having something in place is 5% of the fair market value. So that's basically what the government can sell all of your stuff for. They don't care about debts. They don't care about how much you owe on your mortgage. They don't care if you have credit cards, none of that. They want to know what they can sell it for. And then your estate gets to figure out how to pay those debts off down the line. And so those are kind of the big three reasons, right? And that's if you even know what estate planning, that it exists to protect your assets, right? So part of it is one, sharing the wealth and sharing the information that, hey, let's get an estate plan, getting that word into people's ears, especially in marginalized communities, right? Or within communities of color. So letting them know that estate planning is a thing. And then reasons why those three excuses don't even apply to anybody. And then contacting an attorney so we can actually help you get those going.
Right.